They are gonna tell you what, they are gonna tell you when, they are gonna tell you how to be just like them. You are gonna find out, you're gonna find out on your own. I don't blame you when you don't wanna listen to stories that I tell you. I was a wild one, I was young once, just like you, and I had to find out, on my own. All roads lead you home.
This is a story from Jacob's daddy about what happened to me when I was a little boy. When I was a little boy, I decided I wanted to have a pet. But my parents wouldn't let me have a dog or a cat or a goldfish or a bird. So I decided I would grow my own pet. Here's what I did. I got all sorts of yucky old food, bread and water and milk and paste and all the chemicals I could think of from the bathroom, and I put them in a jar. And I put them in an old jar in a dark corner of our basement, and I hoped that I would be able to grow something in that jar, maybe a pet. Well, I let it sit there for a long time, and then I went back and looked at it, and sure enough, something was growing in there. It was kind of furry and gray and stinky. So I thought, great, I'm going to get a pet out of all of this. And I waited a little bit longer, and it grew even ickier and furrier. What it really was happening was that it was growing moldy and getting very disgusting, but I didn't realize it. I thought I was going to get a little pet monster out of the whole thing. So I kept worrying that my mother would go down in the basement and clean up in the corner, and when she found this jar, she would open up the jar, and my pet, which was icky, moldy, goopy stuff, would come out and eat her up. But I was afraid to tell her about it, too. Now, at the same time, I used to think, when I was this age, a little boy, that I was a great singer. So I would walk down the street, and I'd sing at the top of my lungs in the hopes that an agent from Hollywood or from Broadway would discover my great singing voice and hire me to sing songs on records or in movies. One day I was going down the street singing some song at the top of my lungs, and a little boy down at the end of the block, whose name was Billy Bowdle, except I called him Billy Bottle, stopped me and said, "You have the worst voice I ever heard in my life." I got so mad at Billy Bottle that I decided I was going to make a stink bomb for him. So I went back home and I took my pet jar out of the dark corner of the basement. It was really stinky. I added all sorts of icky stuff to it. I added mustard, I added iodine, I added ammonia, I added everything I could and put it in a bigger jar. And then it really was stinky. I added a lot of vinegar, I added paint, I added everything I could, and I shook it up as hard as I could. And I took it down to the end of the block right in front of Billy Bottle's house, and I took this big jar and I threw it down on the ground and broke this icky stink bomb all over the front of his house. His mother came outside and looked and went inside and got on the telephone and called my mother and told her what I had done. By the time I got back home, my mother was waiting with a pail and a rag and some water and a broom and a dustpan, and she sent me all the way back down to Billy Bottle's house, where I had to pick up all the glass and then kneel down and clean up the whole sidewalk. It took the rest of the day, and it was very stinky. And from that, I learned three things. One, you can't grow a pet in a jar. Two, I didn't have a good singing voice. And three, I shouldn't throw stink bombs in people's houses. The end.
Good afternoon. Wasn't Bill the best storyteller? That recording of Bill's voice that you just heard of him talking was made 34 years ago. And Bill's son, Jacob Hurwitz Goodman, created that animation in 2010 for Bill's 70th birthday. Jacob, thank you for sharing it with us. And how about that splendid music that Allison Lewis just shared with us? Bill had impeccable taste in music. And Allison, I know that he was a big fan of yours. Thank you so much for sharing with us. My name is Katie Callahar, and I'd like to officially welcome you to the memorial celebration honoring Bill Goodman's life. Welcome all of you, everyone. We are so happy to have you all here, and we're so grateful for the big turnout, the great showing, and it says a lot about Bill that you're all here, of course. All 6 of Bill's children, Amy, David, Michael, Jacob, Nick, and Daniel, have worked together over the past several weeks to plan a special program for all of us here today. I have personally watched them act with great care and sensitivity in putting this all together, and they did it in the midst of grieving the loss of their father. They are just remarkable people, all of them. And I know one thing. I know that Bill would be so proud of them for what we are all about to experience. On a personal note, I'm so grateful that Bill's family has trusted me with the privilege of being the MC of this event today. I promise that I've done my best to prepare and do a good job today. After all, it was Bill who taught me how to cross-examine expert witnesses, so I understand what it means to try to be prepared. I mean, I can still hear Bill all those years ago saying, "Katie, the key to beating those liars is preparation. This is serious business. Do your homework. Know their strengths. Know their weaknesses. Anticipate their tricks. Prepare. You can't act like this is just some silly, unimportant thing like a presidential debate. You've got to prepare." Seriously, I just loved Bill, and thank you all for including me. Now, I'm sure you've all noticed that our program has a number of speakers. I think we have 13 or 14 that are going to speak today. We know that's a lot. We also respect and value your time. And for this reason, my introductions of the speakers will be short and sweet. And the presentations, all of us are committed to sticking to our allotted time and doing our best to keep things moving. As we move along, though, please feel free to get up, stretch your legs, take a break, get some water, or anything else you need to do. The restrooms are out in the lobby and down the hall a bit if that's needed. Okay, let's get started. Our first speaker is Peter Hammer. Peter is a professor here at the Wayne State University Law School, where he is the director of the Damon Keith Center for Civil Rights. He's also a historian and an author of numerous books. Peter and Bill were longtime friends, allies, and colleagues, and he would like to share a few words with us about Bill. Peter, would you come up, please? Thanks.
So I was asked to do some content setting and talk about the history that Bill came into in terms of the legal work that his father and other great lawyers had done that he carried on. The three greatest lawyers of their generation were Maurice Sugar, Ernie Goodman, and George Crockett Jr. 6 key letters defined and unite these lawyers: U, A, W, N, L, G. Sugar was general counsel for the UAW and was a lawyer who helped birth the union. Ernie Goodman started doing work for Sugar and ended up being the number 2 UAW lawyer, serving as the legal director. Crockett was one of the top black lawyers in the Roosevelt administration. He was brought into the UAW in 1944 to fight discrimination inside the union. When the restrictive covenants case, Sipes versus McGee, was before the Michigan State Supreme Court in 1946, there was an amicus brief signed by Maurice Sugar for the UAW and another signed by Ernie Goodman for the NLG. By the time that case reached the Supreme Court in January 1948, the names of Sugar and Goodman were nowhere to be found. These lawyers had been purged from the UAW. Walter Reuther was elected in a very contested UAW election in 1946. He gained control of the executive board in 1947. One of the first things that Reuther did was to terminate Sugar's contract as general counsel, effectively ousting Sugar, Goodman, Crockett, and many, many, many others from the union. Indicative of the red baiting that was to come, Reuther purged anyone he thought was a communist sympathizer, too liberal, or perceived as a threat to his control of the union. What's worse, Reuther enacted an economic boycott against these lawyers, making sure that no labor cases were going to go to the best labor lawyers in the country. The lawyers were down, but they were not out, although Sugar never fully recovered from this professional betrayal. On January 1st, 1951, the country's very first racially integrated law firm opened: Goodman, Crockett, Eden, and Robb. Throughout the 1950s, these lawyers fought the worst abuses of the Red Scare. Sugar and Crockett defended the top leadership of the United States Communist Party against criminal charges in United States versus Dennis. Crockett was found in criminal contempt and sentenced to prison for zealously representing his clients. Almost single-handedly, Goodman prevented the Trucks Act from going into effect. The Trucks Act required self-registration of all subversives. Goodman called it the most dangerous law ever enacted in the United States. Ernie went to court to seek an injunction the same day he said goodbye to Crockett, who had to report to prison. Goodman was the only lawyer in the courtroom defending the Michigan Six, Smith Act prosecutions against the top leadership of the Michigan Communist Party. Crockett, facing disbarment because of the contempt charges in Dennis, provided assistance, but behind the scenes. As the Red Scare diminished, Goodman, Crockett, and the NLG pivoted to provide support for the growing civil rights movement. With Goodman as NLG president and Crockett as vice president, the NLG national offices was moved to Detroit, and the NLG initiated a new national program sending lawyers from the North to do legal work for the civil rights protests in the South. Crockett ran the NLG office in Jackson during Mississippi Summer 1964, staying in constant communication with Goodman. Goodman and Crockett had a deep personal and professional relationship. When Crockett faced disbarment, Goodman led the defense and won. When Crockett faced impeachment in the Recorder's Court for his historic actions in the New Bethel incident, Goodman led the defense and won. 1970s and 1980s were no different, as Ernie continued to fight for justice. Goodman defended the Black Panthers in Detroit. Perhaps the struggle he treasured most in this period of his life was the work with the prisoners in the Attica Uprising. Ernie was active his entire life, famously being arrested at the age of 89 in a sit-down strike with the Detroit Free Press. It was into this family legacy that Bill Goodman not only learned how to be a lawyer, but learned the type of lawyer he wanted to become. I'll end with a short story that shows how these legacies connect. Bill went to the University of Chicago Law School. As a summer intern in law school in the early 1960s, he went to work with Lee Holt, a leading black civil rights lawyer, in the maelstrom of the struggles in the deepest parts of the Deep South. It's not just that the apple did not fall far from the tree with Bill Goodman. The apple was the tree. The apple was the tree. We love you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Julie Hurwitz is going to say a few words next. And I don't quite know where to start about Julie. I assume everyone in the room knows that Bill and Julie were married for many years, had 3 incredibly great children together, and they were law partners for 15 years, right up into, and I think maybe over 15 years, right up to Bill's passing. They were comrades in their never-ending battle for social justice for decades. There's a lot more to say on their shared interests and accomplishments, but I'm going to keep my promise to keep it short. Through it all, Bill and Julie remained friends and built one of the best damn law firms for the people that this city has ever seen. Julie, will you please come up and share a few words with us?
First, I want to thank you all for being here and coming from far and wide to help us celebrate Bill's amazing life and legacy. And I just want to say, and this is an aside from my prepared speech, but as I've been greeting you all as you've arrived here today, I keep being reminded of stories and cases and struggles that Bill had been involved in through his life with all of you and each of you, and I wish I had time to mention them all, and I want to apologize in advance that I only have 4 minutes, so I'm using up my time really quickly here. Bill and I had a most interesting, meaningful, and unique relationship for over 40 years. Katie gave you a little flavor. By the time of his untimely passing at the young age of 83, he and I had been and were consistently political allies and comrades throughout. We were, as Katie mentioned, spouses for 15 years, co-parents of our children for 37 years, and the founding law partners in the firm Goodman, Hurwitz, and James for over 17 years. And he had every intention of continuing to work as my and Kat's law partner for another 17 years. Indeed, the night before he died, he had just returned from a 6-day trip in California where he defended several depositions of the family members of a young man who was shot and killed by a police officer in his own backyard. I had picked him up from the airport that night, and the last conversation we had was how excited he was to begin working on a case on behalf of victims of racist violence being perpetrated against African Americans by the private police force that guards the Renaissance Center for General Motors. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how important the committed team at Goodman, Hurwitz, and James was to Bill, as were the many law students who have come through our firm and learned so much from him. He loved mentoring and teaching law students. I think I can safely say that every person who has come through our office loved Bill dearly, but they wanted him to slow down, but not Bill. That would never be Bill. He certainly had his flaws, we all do, but he was at his core one of the most decent, generous, and giving people I have ever known, and always a fighter for justice and for a society in which human rights take priority over the rights of property and capital. While we still have a long way to go on that front, especially now, with fascism here and abroad on the rise, literally at our doorstep, Bill never gave up. He would never slow down. His passion for his work, his clients, the movement for social change, and for his 6 amazing children never wavered. You're going to be hearing a lot from a lot of people today who knew Bill throughout his life as a teenager, a young lawyer, a law partner, a father, a grandfather, a friend, an older lawyer, a teacher, and a mentor to law students and young lawyers. But no matter what he was doing or where he was living, his commitment to and love for his kids was always paramount. He never judged them, and he always supported them, no matter what they did or what choices you made. And I know that Jane agrees with me that all 6 of you have grown into the loving, accomplished, and profoundly humanistic adults that you are, largely because of him. I have been deeply moved and impressed by having had the opportunity to work with and watch these amazing people work together from literally all over the world, because all of his kids are spread around all over the world over this past 6 months, cooperatively, collectively, and lovingly. And the tremendous work that you have done to both cope with your own individual loss, which occurred way sooner than it should have, while at the same time to plan this event so that we can all be together to celebrate and keep your dad's memory alive. Thank you. Bill, I'm angry about the circumstances under which you left us way sooner than you should have. But I think I can speak for everyone here. We all love you, and the world is definitely a better place because of you. We will do our best to carry on your legacy. We will continue to fight against the rapidly encroaching fascism in our country as he would have wanted us to do. WWBD. You get that. What would Bill do? Continue believing in the Constitution as a living, breathing document for democracy. Continue using the law as an instrument of social change. Continue fighting the man. And continue telling our activist clients, their friends, their parents, and their family members to... You got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I'm going to read a poem that was collectively written by the staff of Goodman, Hurwitz, and James. If I can get through it. We miss you in the morning when we don't see your car. We miss you during coffee when we can't ask how you are. We miss you sneaking off sometimes to bring us each a treat. We miss you in the afternoon, walking around in stocking feet. We miss you during meetings, impatient as you were. We miss you during happy hour, some of those a blur. We miss hearing show tunes, classical, jazz too, playing in the afternoons, sometimes while you'd snooze. We miss hearing all your stories, Roseanne Leonard and the Joels. We miss your jokes and Yiddish lessons, and of course, the Seinfeld quotes. We miss you as our boss and mentor, but more so as our friend. We miss you oh so much, BG, until we meet again. Our next speaker, Julie, do you know if our next speaker has arrived? Oh, there she is. She needs no introduction. She is Detroit's own Rashida Tlaib, the United States Representative for Michigan's 12th Congressional District. Congresswoman Tlaib is the first Palestinian-American woman to serve in Congress and the first Muslim woman to serve in the Michigan legislature. In addition to her passionate service as a beloved progressive warrior on behalf of her constituents, Congresswoman Tlaib also serves on the board of the Sugar Law Center. Bill and Rashida were friends and colleagues for years, and we're so glad she's here to share some of her perspectives on Bill. Rashida?
Thank you all so much and especially the family, and for allowing me to share this space with all of you to honor my really good friend, Bill Goodman, who in my office we call the true people's lawyer who never wavered in his pursuit of justice. So when I met Bill over 15 years ago, he was president of the Maurice and Jane Sugar Law Center, Justice Center. So he soon became my mentor, and to not just me, but many other movement lawyers, and a hero to those who were always seeking justice. And I still remember our first meeting, and I know I've spoken to people about it, but I was the youngest, I think, on the Sugar Law Center board at that time, and Tova had put me on the board, and I came in the first gathering, and they were talking about some case or something, and it was going back, and there was this tension between Julie Hurwitz and Bill Goodman. And you all got to realize I didn't know anything. Like I was working at Access, which is a leading Arab American human services agency. I came from that perspective. I was more of a social worker at heart of anything else. And so I'm getting in there, and it's just tension and tension. And if you know anything about the board meetings, they're like a whole Saturday day, and I think we took a break. And I was like, John, to John Filer, I was like, John, oh my God. Because it was so bad that you know how something's happening and you like want to pretend you're not there because you're so like, but that's how bad. And everybody was just like, la, la, la. And I kept looking at everybody's face like, did you hear that? Did you? And and John looks at me, he goes, oh, no, they used to be married. And I don't know, after the second half of the meeting, I was just like, oh, okay. This is actually funny now. But later, I got elected to State House. And if you know anything about movement folks who run for office, and when we do win, it's different. People start treating you a little different, right? I'm part of the institution that we're all trying to either tear down or fix, and folks were starting to look at me a little different. People that were my friends for years, but not Bill, not once. I still remember always calling him. When I got elected, someone couldn't afford an attorney to fight for them. Bill wouldn't hesitate to help, even when I had to get a translator for the family. He'd show up in the steps. I would never ever tell Julie that I called him Bill. And he also helped to bait and tackle local business shop in Southwest Detroit to take on a billionaire, and you know who that is. But he truly always used his expertise, his love, to help teach my residents how to evoke their rights when police were using many of my neighbors' immigration status as a weapon. Our Bill had a huge heart, y'all. And boy, did I love angry Bill. When he got really angry, it was awesome. I mean, you know how some people like yell and they're huffing about it? Bill did this thing where he would like rub his head. You know what I'm talking about? He would rub his head, right? And then he'd look up and he goes, "That's bullshit." And you immediately felt his focus to protect our civil liberties, holding powerful accountable. And at that moment, you also felt like, damn, I think he can actually do it too. Like, it was like this warm blanket of like, yeah, angry Bill's gonna get them. Bill never let his success get to him, and I've seen it. He remained so rough around the edges, and it was beautiful. True Detroit grit, when people talk about it, that's Bill. And rarely do you ever see that in the field of law, y'all, really. Most are too busy helping corporations and thinking about themselves, but not Bill, not once. He was so proud of all the work he did, not on Guantanamo Bay detainees, but so many others that I know everybody knows about. He was so incredibly proud. It speaks to Bill's character that one of the most important lawyers in our American history will be perhaps best remembered, those close to him, for his endless jokes and his bottomless love for his children and his comrades. The last email exchange between Bill and I was November 16th, 2023. At 11:18 p.m., and I once in a while did this when I first got elected, and Julie knows it's been a hard journey, many of you have seen. And the subject line was, "Suing Fox News." Did you know about this? And Jack Schultz, Julie, and Bill. Jack was the first to be like, "Yeah, let's have a conference call." Or I think he said, "I'm out of town." I think Bill was actually in California. I can't remember. But Bill, of course, I was like, "Yeah, Bill's going to say yes." But I can't leave Julie out of this one. This one's a big one. So when I sent out because I got to go, because it's like mom and dad, and mom's going to say no, so you go to dad for yes. That was the relationship I have, because to me, they were a unit. No matter if they weren't married, they were a unit. And so she knew, though. I realized at the National Lawyers Guild how much she knew. And so 11:18, I'm like, suing Fox News is subject matter, and I was like, I'm done. And just so I don't get too emotional, like, it was really hard, y'all. Like, I had, 24/7 security. I mean, it was terrible. And I was like, oh my God, I have to have security. Come in and use the bathroom. My kids are like, why is there here? Because the death threats wouldn't stop, because Fox would just evoke straight up lies. And I was like, I want a cease and desist letter, come on. And the reason I went to Bill is because when the forever impeached president came after me, I don't know, Julie, do you remember he was on this kick, we can go after him, Rashida. I was like, really, Bill? And angry Bill rubbing his head, he's like, no, we can go after him. And I was like, okay, we could maybe do that. But I really think he was gonna go for it too, Julie. He was. So it's an honor. It's an honor to join all of you today. They call me Mama Bear in Congress. As you all know, I'm the eldest of 14. I'm taking care of people all my life. But Bill Goodman was my Papa Bear. And I will forever remember him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashida. The next speaker on the program was going to be Marjorie Cohen, but she was not able to make it here today. And her dear friend, Elizabeth Meyer, is going to speak on Marjorie's behalf. Elizabeth.
Thank you for suspending your belief for a moment and letting me stand in for Margie. I brought a hat to help for everybody. And I have her words here. I met Bill in 1973 at a guild meeting as a first-year law student. My experience in general was that lawyers were disinterested in law students. I was ignored and left out of conversations by some of the best. Bill was totally different. He befriended me, encouraged me, included me, and not least, he inspired me. I watched Bill continue to befriend and inspire many young people for the next 50 years. He invited me a few years ago to sit in on his constitutional law class here at Wayne State. It was delightful to see Bill engage with his students who he knew by name. He was clearly interested in them and their thoughts, and in challenging them intellectually. It was my great privilege to work with Bill as a law student, first on the Attica defense here and in Buffalo, and then on the federal case of Bergman v. U.S., brought on behalf of freedom rider Walter Bergman, Bill's friend who had been severely beaten and was now wheelchair-bound as a result. I went with Bill to Anniston, Alabama to review documents and records. I actually found a smoking gun to help prove our case as I dug through discovery, which was beyond exciting. Both in Attica and in the Freedom Rider case, Bill's ability to work collaboratively to analyze a case and develop a strategy was astounding. It was thrilling to be in any way part of those cases under Bill's remarkable tutelage. Now, hanging out with Bill as a friend was a very different experience, one which brought its own risks and rewards. In the early years, Bill's car looked as if it was owned by Pigpen. I had to push aside all kinds of flotsam and jetsam before I could sit my little tush on the seat. In those days, the DIA had a morning concert called Breakfast with Bach. Around that time, Bill took me to his favorite ever-so-seedy diner in a very pre-gentrified Cass corridor. I called it Breakfast with Bums. Michael Goodman told me recently that Bill took him there regularly in high school, but he turned out fine anyway. Bill enjoyed being a regular at places. I get that. I'm a regular at breakfast places, although Bill was more into local bars where he would befriend the bartenders. Bill enjoyed stepping out of the arena of the illegal community and being around and getting to know all kinds of folks. He loved people. Now, as the years passed, Bill's cars became far more presentable, but his driving skills moved in a negative direction. Recently, as he blew a stop sign, he said, "Amy says I'm a terrible driver." I said, "Amy is right. I'm driving from now on." Bill and I went to dinner very often. He was always enthused about meeting me, although if he sent me a text about a plan to meet and I didn't respond, immediately I would get follow-up question mark. Apparently, he expected me to be ever vigilant in texting with him. We would always say, "I love you" to each other. I'm so glad we did that. I retired completely from the practice of law 8 years ago at age 65. I always felt a little sheepish that while I was living a life of blissful sloth and obscurity, Bill, who was many years my senior, continued to be a tireless, active participant in the struggle. His very DNA made him unrelenting fighter for justice. So what will we miss about our Bill? His smile, his giggle, his laugh, the literal twinkle in his eye, his appreciation for his own humor, his fierce and total commitment to his many clients, friends, and causes, his vibrancy, his intellect, and most of all, his love. He loved us all. We were very lucky to have had him for as long as we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I wish Margie would have told me about Bill's driving, because I let him borrow my car one day, and he crashed it right in front of the office. It was brand new at the time. I think my insurance rates are still high from that. But, would you please welcome Bill's fifth child, Nick Hurwitz Goodman, to share a few words with us about his dad?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill's son, Nick, child number 5 out of 6. I remember seeing my dad cry only twice in my life. First time was when his father, Ernie, died when I was 6. My mom was in my room reading me a book. My dad burst into the room and said, "He's gone." He then broke down. The second time was in our backyard during Kate and Dan's wedding ceremony. Kate Bush and Dan Monticelli. I was sitting next to him, and he was just beaming. I said something to him like, "God, isn't this a lovely ceremony?" He said, "Yes, it is. Well, I think I might cry now." His big eyes welled up, and he shed a few tears with that trademark twinkle, his face aglow with happiness and pride. For a man who cared so passionately about life, family, justice, and the rights of every person on this planet, he was also quite stoic and introspective, contradictory in many ways, charming and bumbling at the same time. He dedicated his life to helping the most vulnerable victims of state violence, but he carried himself with such levity and light. He was the funniest person I know, always ready with a joke or anecdote about his life. One of the last times we were together, just the two of us, was when I was living in the Catskills. He came up and visited for a few days. Knowing his love of Bob Dylan, I'd asked if he'd heard his most recent album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. He hadn't, so I put it on for him, and we listened as we drove among the beautiful mountains. He loved it, and he loved one song in particular titled, "I Contain Multitudes." I sing the songs of experience like William Blake. I have no apologies to make. Everything's flowing, all at the same time. I live on the boulevard of crime. I drive fast cars, and I eat fast foods. I contain multitudes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Judge Elizabeth Gleischer is going to speak next. She told me on the phone the other day that she first met Bill when she was a young girl, and they reconnected when she was a law student. They worked together for many years, and she has a few words to say to us about Bill. Thanks.
I want to take you back to 1979. My father, Maury Gleischer, and two other slightly more than middle-aged Jewish men were indicted by a federal grand jury in Grand Rapids. It was a political prosecution, and I'm going to save those details for another day. Ernie Goodman represented my father pro bono. Ken Mogill, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, and John Pirich represented the other guys. I had been hired as an associate attorney at the Goodman and Eden firm a day or two before or after the indictment came down. I was privileged to be allowed, even as a young new lawyer, to work on the case. I can tell you that Bill Goodman did not work on the case. Ernie Goodman did all the work on the case for my dad. But when it came time for the trial team to pack up and go to Grand Rapids, the decision was made that Bill would accompany us, basically to keep an eye out on Ernie. Ernie was then 71 years old, trying a major lawsuit. Jury selection took a full week. The following week, Ernie began his opening statement. 10 minutes in, Ernie suddenly stopped speaking. He turned red and became shaky on his feet. He told the judge, "I can't go on." The judge cleared the courtroom, EMS came, and as it turned out, Ernie had had a transient ischemic attack. He was okay, but obviously he was hospitalized. Back in the courtroom, the judge turned to Bill and said, "Mr. Goodman, you filed an appearance in this case. and you're up to bat. Bill asked for an adjournment, denied. The judge did give him 15 minutes to prepare, however. And I can tell you, and Kenny and I talked last night to verify this, Bill was absolutely fucking brilliant. Later, Bill told people, and this is so Bill, it didn't matter what I said. The jurors were looking at my dad's empty chair. But that was really far too modest and completely untrue, because a few days later, Bill exquisitely cross-examined and destroyed the government's main witness, an FBI agent we affectionately called Ratface, or rat with the word beginning with an F. The case was over after that cross, but it went on for 5 more weeks, unfortunately. Then it was a quick not guilty for all 3. And I fell in love with Bill Goodman. Bill loved me back, just like he loved everybody in his life. He loved his clients. He loved his law partners at Goodman Eden, some of whom were not all that easy to love. He loved practicing law. He loved making the law actually work for people. Bill exemplified not only commitment and compassion, but as you've heard today, devotion to people. He was the inspiration for a generation, maybe 2 generations, of younger lawyers, including me. But lest you think Bill was perfect, one more quick story. In 1985, my husband Mark Ronzato and I had the honor of working with Bill, Neil Bush, and Deb LaBelle on the Walter Bergman case, which you just heard about. We sued the FBI in that case, and after a long and difficult fight, we got hundreds of pages of classified documents, thousands of pages of classified documents, all marked classified, top secret, many redactions, but the documents, in addition to the work Elizabeth did, proved our case. Then it was off to Kalamazoo for the trial. Bill was in charge of bringing the documents. Probably not a great decision in retrospect. But he efficiently packed the documents in a cardboard box, and I'm sure he intended to put them in his car. But unfortunately, he left the box with the documents on top of his car, and then started driving to Kalamazoo. It wasn't until he reached approximately Jackson that the documents started flying through the air, out of the box, and landing on people's lawns. So the FBI began getting calls from people in Jackson, Battle Creek, Adrian, who were finding top secret documents on their lawns. Bill and I later viewed this as very good revenge for the FBI, and it didn't matter, we had another copy. So, and I think the judge laughed about it. That judge was a totally different person. Anyway, Bill could be slightly absent-minded, as all of us who worked for him knew, but he was bold, creative, strong, fearless, and one of the warmest and most accepting people I've ever known. The fight for justice goes on. I'm still in it to some extent, but Bill is whispering in my ear every day. My sister and I, my sister's here today, we are so grateful that Bill Goodman saved my father's life and that he has given meaning and purpose to ours. Thank you.
Professor Peter Quint has known Bill Goodman since the 1950s. They were high school classmates. And he is here to talk with us about that time during Bill's life.
Well, hello, my name is Peter Quint, and I've known Bill since the early 1950s. I'd love to tell you some stories about Bill's earlier life, about our high school club, the Imperials, of which Bill was a very proud member. Even in later life, I understand teaching the Imperials song to various friends and associates, but I won't ask you to sing it now. I could tell you about Bill's great love of reading and of literature, something that I think always must be understood when you think of Bill, which he had from his high school days throughout his life. I could tell you about the hours that we spent listening, rambling through the very impressive collection of radical literature and radical phonograph records, Spanish Civil War songs. I think I heard the strains of Joe Hill here a little earlier today, somebody perhaps on the organ, and it took me back to those days when we spent hours listening to those records which belonged to Ernest Goodman, Bill's father. And I could tell you about Bill's stellar career as a high school actor in the drama club, perhaps most memorably in the role of the down-to-earth but somehow all-knowing stage manager, the star of Thornton Wilder's great play, Our Town. But the story about Bill that I most want to tell you is a 60-year-old story. And yet, I remember it as vividly as though it were yesterday. In the summer of 1961, see, more than 60 years ago, directly after we graduated from college, Bill and I and a couple other friends, two other friends, spent a few weeks traveling around a number of countries of Europe. And in a number of places, and I think this is truly remarkable, the local people, the people of the country, firmly believed that Bill was a fellow countryman. The waiters in the restaurant in Rome knew, of course, that Bill had not been born in Italy, but somehow they were firmly convinced that Bill was the son of an Italian family that had left Italy, and that he was coming back as a native son to visit the old family, the old country. And the scene that I remember so vividly was in a Hungarian restaurant in Vienna. There was a small Hungarian orchestra, a zither player, and a violinist. And the violinist wandered from table to table. When he came to our table, he sized us up, and he went over to Bill. And looking directly at Bill, he began to play in a way with his bow so that the bow pointed directly at Bill, really almost in his face. And as he was pointing his bow at Bill, he called out, Ungarman, Ungarman, which meant Hungarian, Hungarian. He deeply believed that he had found a fellow son of Hungary in Bill. So I think that this amusing and remarkable story has a deeper meaning. And that is that even the Roman waiters and the Hungarian violinists who didn't know Bill, had never met him before, still felt some kind of instinctive wish to bring him into their sphere or to be in his sphere. Well, we know, and we've just heard, we know that Bill was a great litigator. And that is a skill, in my opinion, which is in part innate, cannot be learned, but also in part it can be learned. But Bill had a skill, one can say a quality, that was completely innate, that cannot be learned. And that was that people wanted Bill to be their friend. They wanted Bill to be in their sphere, or they wanted to be in Bill's sphere. And I think all of us gathered here today have felt the remarkable tug of Bill's friendship. Well, Bill and I both took Latin from the great Dr. Edith Kovach at Mumford High School. And I don't think that Bill would mind. He might even be gratified, but certainly at least amused, if I concluded with a Latin tag that somehow has survived from Dr. Kovach's day. Actually, it's from a Roman funeral poem that is now more than 2,000 years old. And the tag is Ave atque vale, Ave atque vale Bill, and it means hail and farewell. Hail and farewell, Bill. Hail and farewell, dear friend of so many decades. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. Now, I know a few of you out there know the Imperial song. And I think we should just do it. So, everybody who knows it, it's very short, let's go. IMPERIALS, Imperials. We're going to take a short break from the speeches and watch a video. We can cue it up at any moment.
Well, imagine my surprise when I received letters from Americans all over the country asking me to deliver copies of the Constitution of the United States to President George Bush. We have constitutions here. 37,372 Americans have asked us to deliver these constitutions for young George here in the White House. Can we drop them off here?
Oh, sorry.
Can we give them to you?
No. Can't leave it here.
Well, I can't help you out here.
Nope.
We can't do it here, though, huh? Hello.
Well, we're just trying to drop them off for him.
Can't even drop. Sir, you're gonna have to turn that off, please. Thank you.
A lot of constitutions.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you did mention there was a tree.
Yeah, let's go to the tree. Hi, kids. Hi, children. Merry Christmas, kids.
Where's the reindeer?
Copy of the Constitution. Merry Christmas to one and all. Can we leave them here? We cannot.
The hope is that he might read one.
One.
All right,
All right.
I guess we'll,
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Thank
Christmas.
you.
Happy holidays.
Cheer up. Things will brighten up. The Constitution will. I know. One of these days. One of these days. It'll be all right. Should deliver them the goddamn articles of impeachment. That's what I really would have wished to deliver to the White House.
That video was made during Bill's days at the CCR and the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. And our next two speakers are going to speak together. Two fabulous lawyers from the Center for Constitutional Rights, Rachel Maripol and Maria LaHood.
I'm Rachel. The first time I met Bill Goodman was sometime in 2001 when he interviewed me for an internship at CCR. He sat me down in his office and started by asking me if I had any questions. I was very thrown off guard because I had heard from the NYU guidance office that that would be the last question I would be asked in an interview, not the first one. But Bill broke rules. Eventually, he asked me why I wanted to work at CCR. And then he proceeded to tease me for the next 20 years about my ridiculous answer, that I had wanted to work at CCR for my entire life. But during the interview, he was kind. And we bonded over the fact that he had unsuccessfully represented my parents after they had been arrested at a protest, and over my interest in working on police misconduct and prison cases, sharing that that was what motivated him the most as well. By the end of the interview, I knew we were family.
I'm Maria. In Bill's first stint as legal director at CCR, from 1998 to 2003, he led the center to challenge fascism in all its forms, from suing the NYPD for its racist stop-and-frisk policy to filing the first Guantanamo habeas cases, famously saying, "My job is to defend the Constitution from its enemies. Its main enemies right now are the Justice Department and the White House." I started at CCR in 2003, in between Bill's two stints there. When he came back in 2005, we were still fighting racist cops and post-9/11 abuses, including torture, rendition, and warrantless wiretapping. We had also issued articles of impeachment against George W. Bush. So if you couldn't hear what he said at the end there, what Santa said, he said, "We should have delivered goddamn articles of impeachment." We were also just launching CCR's Palestine work, seeking accountability for Israel's war crimes in US courts. Bill was all for it. He never had a single concern about the Palestine work or any possible consequences. He knew what was right, and he was just as fearless and bold joining the struggle for Palestinian liberation as he was with other fights against fascism and racism.
Bill knew how much he was teaching us, but he also genuinely wanted to hear what we thought about his legal theories. I remember him bursting into my office in a moment of clarity about how an old Supreme Court case supported his theory that the Fourth Amendment did not allow delay of deportation for investigative purposes. He sat down in my office so that I could read the case, and then we could talk about it. At legal meetings, he refused to set an agenda. Instead, he just wanted us all to go around the room and share what was on our minds. But he brought muffins every week to make it sweeter. Walking with him to the courthouse on the day of oral argument in Turkman v. Ashcroft, the case that Bill designed to challenge the post-9/11 detentions, he turned to me, I was a year out of law school, to tell me how nervous he was. His openness helped me to admit my own fears in my career. Bill was one of the first people, beyond correctional officers, those detainees got to talk to after their terrifying arrests and inexplicable detentions, and they loved him for it, and never forgot him and the central role he played in their struggle for justice.
Bill's irreverence, passion, and clarity drove and energized CCR's work and our office. During strategic planning, which Bill obviously hated, we were identifying our values, and some colleagues talked about how they were motivated by love, and you could see Bill's face. Bill said, "Love? I'm motivated by anger. I think we should have anger as a core value." And we laughed, and he said, "No, really." Bill was an inspiration to all the lawyers, students, and activists coming through CCR, and he was a protective and loyal colleague. He wanted to know what each one of us thought. He inspired us to be bold and fight hard, but also to have fun. Bill made that part easy. After Bill left CCR, he continued to push us to be bold. He'd text or call and say, "What's CCR doing about the deployment of feds for local law enforcement?" Or "What's the plan after Trump was elected?" He was always spotting the next big case against the latest injustice and always speaking truth to power.
Years after Bill left CCR for the second time, work brought me to Detroit. And of course, Bill wouldn't hear of me staying in a hotel. He picked me up from my panel and took me out to dinner with his family. He wanted to take me to all his local bars, but this proved a little challenging because there were a lot of them. And at every one, Bill was known and loved. He had represented the bartender or the person on the stool next to us. Seeing him in Detroit, so deep in his community, I finally understood why we couldn't keep him.
Bill was not just a mentor and a colleague, but the dearest of friends. Bill stayed connected and would come visit New York over the years and sometimes would stay with my family. As much as Bill was a legend and a brilliant litigator, he was also a sensitive and loving sweetheart. He loved to share stories about his kids and his grandkids. He and my daughter formed a Wanna Play Club. They'd play together in her room, they'd dance at the farmer's market, and he'd read children's books to her as if they were Shakespeare. We'd go to his old haunts in Brooklyn, Two Boots or Sotto Voce, and wherever Bill went, he had friends. It wasn't quite like Detroit, where everyone knew him, but even in New York, everyone who knew him loved him. We'll forever miss the fire in Bill's gut, the love and anger in his heart, and the mischievous twinkle in his eyes. He will always be our legal director. We love and miss you, Bill.
Thank you both. Allison Krieger is next. She's a premier criminal defense lawyer here in Detroit, and from what I understand, pretty much all she does is win. And I think Allison has known Bill since she was born, but she'll speak more to that in a moment. Allison?
Good afternoon. With respect to the thing about winning, some days that feels more true than others. But my phone calls with Bill, because we talked often and we saw each other often, they always began with not a hello, but I would pick up and I would say, Mr. Goodman, and he would say, Mademoiselle. And then we would waste no time talking about the issue du jour. And inevitably, I would say something that probably other people wouldn't find funny, but he would laugh and he would say, don't make me laugh. Bill was a lot of things to a lot of people, and to me, he was my mentor, he was my colleague, my co-counsel, my former boss, and my very dear friend, and his most recent title, my favorite 80-year-old dinner date. I met Bill through my parents, Mark and Cindy, when I was very young. And as the story goes, my twin sister and I carpooled with the three Goodman boys, Hurwitz Goodman boys, to Friends School. And Lauren and I, my sister and I, were kicked out of the carpool because we were too unruly. And when Bill and I became friends much later in life, he assured me that it was not his decision to kick us out of the carpool. I'm not saying it was Julie's, but it was not Bill's. And I know that that's true because Bill never shied away from unruly people. He was never offended by that. And when I was a rising 3L at Wayne State University Law School, I had the pleasure of working for what was a pretty newly established Goodman Hurwitz practice. And that was really the beginning of my good friendship with Bill. And even though I was no stranger to legendary lawyers, that I had been around many of them as I grew up, I was very nervous to work for Bill. You know, would he think I was capable? Would he think I was talented? Would he think I was smart enough? And at that point, he was most recently known for pioneering Guantanamo Bay litigation in the aftermath of 9/11. And he never thought it was right to suspend the Constitution because of fear. And I had to live up to the expectations of that person. And I remember when I started working for him and we reviewed my very first assignment, which started out very serious and then very quickly transitioned into a sing-along to My Attorney Bernie. And if you guys don't know the song, I encourage you to Google it after this. And Bill was just tickled by it. And this is the kind of person that he was. He really, as serious as he was, he taught me not to take myself too seriously and not to get bogged down by the work, but to also get joy out of the little things. He genuinely loved the little things. And no matter how many times humanity seemed to let him down by deliberately and methodically making laws that oppressed people, primarily black and brown people, he never gave up. He never stopped fighting to change those laws and dismantle that power structure. And it was one of the greatest lessons that he imparted to me and many others. And getting to really know Bill, to really understand Bill, and learn from him has been one of the greatest honors of my young life. When I started doing criminal defense work, he would send me cases, some that paid, many that did not. And I always said yes, not because Bill made me feel pressured to take the cases, but because I believed that somehow my decision not to would lead him to believe that the next generation wasn't going to be there to carry the torch. And I couldn't let that happen. And Bill had this innate ability to see the good in people. No case and no person was too small for him, and I never regretted taking on any pro bono work that Bill sent me. Even the time that I believed that I may be held in contempt by a Wayne County District Court judge when my client, who was charged with a misdemeanor retail fraud, and it was a sex worker, went off script and said to the judge, the reason I've continued to use drugs, Your Honor, is because it is difficult to perform fellatio sober. And I was like, she didn't say it exactly like that, but it's a family-friendly. And so I did not tell Bill the story myself. I ordered the transcript for him, and I let him read it. And he said, well, I would have represented you if you were held in contempt for free. And I was like, I know, Bill, I know. It's hard to sum up my favorite 80-year-old dinner date in 4 minutes, and I may have gone over, so I wrote it down just so I wouldn't. But I'll close with some words of gratitude. Thank you to Bill's family for sharing him with me and with all of us. Thank you to Bill for inspiring me to never give up. Thank you for reminding me to always find the good in people, that it's okay to be angry, that you should hope for the best, but be vigilant of abuses of power. Thank you for teaching me the lyrics to My Attorney Bernie. Thank you for teaching me what a gin and sonic is and how to make salad dressing out of jam. And thank you for letting me know it's okay to have dinner at 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday because you're a workaholic. And thank you for teaching me about the law and life and everywhere in between. I think about you and talk about you often, Bill, and I miss my favorite 80-year-old dinner date. It was a gift to know you.
Thank you, Allison. It's impossible to summarize the life and work of Albie Sachs here today. A lawyer and an activist, Albie joined the ANC and fought apartheid in South Africa, was repeatedly imprisoned in solitary confinement because of it, went into exile in England, later moved to Mozambique, and in 1988 lost his arm and his sight in one eye in an assassination attempt on his life by agents of apartheid South Africa. After the 1994 elections, Nelson Mandela appointed Albie as one of the first members of South Africa's Constitutional Court, and Albie helped draft South Africa's constitution. And of course, Albie and Bill were lifelong friends, fellow comrades, and warriors for justice. He now joins us by video to share some remembrances of Bill.
My first memory of Bill, climbing. Bill had come to Cape Town, it would have been 1962 or 61, thereabouts, following on Ernie Goodman, who had come with Frida, Bill's mom, to see the little town outside Cape Town where she'd been born. A great friendship between Albie and the Goodman family. And now it was Bill's turn to be with me. And we climbed Table Mountain. The second memory is driving in North America from Detroit to Algonquin Lake Park, whatever it was called. Bill's a dad with his children, I'm a dad with my children. Big van, everybody chatting away, and Bill stops the van. He's looking at his watch, and he says, sorry everybody, I've got to stop. He goes out, we wait, he comes back, he's beaming, he's so excited. He'd been in touch with his firm, and they had just won a lawsuit for something like $3 million. And he got that news stopping on the road, driving up. And it was a case that the firm had brought about somebody who'd been injured at work by a new machine that had been made, and the jury had been so angry at this idea of this soulless, money-making industrial outfit, and they went for the family of the man who was destroyed in their pursuit of profit because they didn't take proper precautions. And we had a great holiday. So I remember Bill in that sense, the family person. He loved his children. He loved his companions. He was a very loving, giving person and a generous person and a great person to travel with and be with because of that kind of ebullience that was so enjoyable to share in. My third memory is walking. This is now in New York, and we're walking across Brooklyn Bridge. He's going to work, and I'd been staying in Brooklyn, and we're walking and we're talking, and there's that huge city around us, but we're totally wrapped up in our ideas, and he's with the Center for Constitutional Rights. He was like stern and thoughtful and preoccupied, and it was a heavy energy that he was carrying with him, the responsibilities of now not just being an attorney in Detroit fighting for clients in particular cases, but somehow bearing the weight of this team of people trying to ensure constitutional rights, constitutional literacy, constitutional awareness, constitutional feel for everybody in the United States and anybody elsewhere in the world interested in what's going on in the United States. The fourth memory, I would say we were ambling in Detroit, that city he loved so much. Both a lot older, with grandchildren now. And he took me with such pride to the pub, that's what we would call it, the bar where Rodriguez used to sing. And we were reminiscing a lot. We're discussing current events. He's got that geniality that he always had. There was something resolute, strong, focused, centered in Bill. A strong sense of right and wrong, connected with people's struggles, connected with justice, coupled with a great amiability, generosity. A lot of people on the left have beautiful ideas, strong convictions, terrific people, but they tense and inward and so wrapped up in their heads and their ideas. Often a lot of anger there. I didn't feel that with Bill. He had a generosity and an openness of spirit, a geniality. He could connect up with people. He enjoyed life. He enjoyed being. He enjoyed doing things. He enjoyed companionship. He enjoyed solidarity. He enjoyed enjoying. It was immensely pleasurable. I looked forward to my meetings with him. It's hard to say goodbye. It's hard to say goodbye. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. He didn't just fade away. He didn't die after a long illness. Suddenly, Bill was gone. It was hard. A beautiful friend, a wonderful friend. Bye-bye, Bill.
Candy Crowley and Bill Goodman were friends for probably nearly 50 years. I don't personally know Candy very well, but I have to say I feel like I do, because so many times Bill told me that she was one of his most favorite people in the world, and that he loved her sense of humor. So I'm really looking forward to what Candy has to say here today. Thanks.
What an honor to follow Albie Sachs. We've got a story about Albie right from there in here. I didn't know about it, so let's get going. Dear Bill, remember the guy in my English lit class? The self-described Renaissance man who wore the beret? The haughty guy who so ironically misused the word supercilious and then asked if he could write his paper in the form of a letter from Maggie Tulliver to her brother Tom. Although we laughed about him, we came to view him as a bold creative, an artist, a person whose ego was to be checked, but who offered real flair. Who would think about writing a letter? In a situation like this, Renaissance man was one of the many we observed from afar who operated outside of our daily stride, whose lifestyle and characters we wanted to know about. They included the long-ago client who dreamed of opening a 24/7 auto parts store, the guy in the junk truck with his arm lovingly around his German shepherd's neck, the 4 Snoop sisters who shared an apartment, a car, and a tube of lipstick. Little Mickey in the night kitchen, now he was a dreamer. And then there were those we actually knew or wished we knew, including friends. Your mother's friend who talked way too much about her new hairstyle and then said, "Enough about me, Frida, let's talk about you. What do you think of my new hairstyle?" And Bill, your romantic version of how Fidel Castro asked Alicia Alonso to lead the art part of his Education and Arts for All program, that's not borne out by research. But it put her as first on the list of girlfriends I love to tease you about. Bonnie Raitt was not far behind. A few more words about friends. After a Sunday night carry-out dinner with Albie, when I was your guest, we decided to go out for a beverage, and we wound up at the Old Miami because that was the only place that was open. I was nearly mortified. There was no one in there but us on the crusty couches in the back and a motley crew at the bar. But Bill, there you were with Albie, international giants, enjoying friendship in the most unpretentious setting. Not all was fun. Recall our dear friend in a dreadful relationship. You called for her to get out. And when I said, "But Bill, face it, sometimes it's enough to just be held at night," he reluctantly agreed. That's Bonnie, Bill. It's in many of her love songs. You modeled love, loyalty, and compassion, and more. Judith Maggid's transition, your devotion to Eva, your loyalty to Neil, your love of Paul Rosen, your treasure of Jim Tuck's memorial bench, Sobel, your help for me in my time of grief. We were fascinated with all of these people, the bold creator with ego issues, the artists, the art patrons, dreamers, romantics, narcissists, egotists, and especially those who desperately wanted to love and to be loved. You were or knew all of those things and more. You had the courage to take hard cases and risk your ego in the chance of a loss because you knew that an unchecked ego could be a bar to the very best things in life. I hope these words stir memories in others here who have shared similar experiences with you in the different chapters of your life. I've not talked about your family, Bill, each of whom you cherished. I will keep my memory of those private today, but I offer this as one of your legacies. We celebrate the life of Bill Goodman, a person whose desire to love and to be loved surpassed none, and whose vigorous explorations uncovered just that. Signed with love, Candy.
Thank you, Candy. When Bill lived in New York in the 2000s, he and John Moore hung a shingle and practiced law together for a couple of years. They had been friends for decades, first meeting when Jonathan was a young lawyer working for the People's Law Office in Chicago. Their friendship survived, even though their law partnership didn't. John is still fighting the good fight in New York, and he's with us here today to share some of his memories of Bill.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's incredible to sit here and to listen to all this love and affection for Bill. He was truly a wonderful human being, somebody we love dearly. I was pleased to meet him actually even before the People's Law Office, even before I went to law school, actually. When he would come to Chicago to do guild work. We became friends. Eventually, he became a mentor, and we became colleagues, and then we became partners, and then we became ex-partners, which doesn't necessarily mean you stop having contact with them, as we know. So, his work with the Guild, I think, deserves some specific reference here. He was very instrumental in doing two incredible things for the Lawyers Guild. One, in the early 70s, mid-70s, he was president of the Guild, I believe. My dates may be wrong a little bit. And it was a very tumultuous time for the left, for the Guild, specifically in terms of different groups wanting to have sway and influence over the Lawyers Guild, and Bill was masterful in how he was able to lead the organization through that period. And he did it a lot with his brilliance as a thinker, with his history as the son of Ernie Goodman, and with his humor. I remember him speaking at conventions where he would repeat the names of all the presidents in like 1 minute. And I haven't heard that for a while. I hope you have that on tape. But that was, I can't even remember all the presidents in 1 minute. But anyway. And so he was masterful in getting us through that period in the Guild. There was another part of his work in the Guild which has gone fairly unnoticed, which is Bill was, of course, one of the pioneers of the work we do, the police misconduct work, the government misconduct. Like Bill, I teach police misconduct now in law school, but Bill was really a inventor, if you will, of that genre of work, and worked with several people, some of whom are here today: Michael Avery, Michael Deutsch. There's others. I'm sorry if I haven't recognized you. Flint Taylor, to create this organization called the National Police Accountability Project, which is an incredible project of the Lawyers Guild, but has become so successful and so important in developing new, young civil rights lawyers, which are so much needed now, especially given what's going on. And Bill was along with Michael and Dave Radofsky and Lynn Wilson in Seattle, the incorporators of that organization. And he was really a driving force behind it. And it's really an incredibly dynamic group that has CLEs around the country several times a year that mentors young lawyers, and it's really a testament to Bill's work and to all the work of lawyers during that period of time to create that organization. And I would just note that the Guild has survived for, I don't know how many, 75, 80 years. It's never been more under attack than it is now, given the Guild's support of the Palestinian liberation struggle. We see it amongst other lawyers. We see it in terms of how the government is beginning to target the Guild. And so I really urge each and every one of you to pay attention to that. I was very lucky to be able to be in New York. I moved to New York in '83 and then left the People's Law Office. And Bill came somewhere in the '90s, I believe. And it was great that he would join us in New York. He came to, as Rachel and Maria have said, to be the legal director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, which was an organization that had been in flux even before Bill was there. And I think with the work of his predecessor, Michael Deutsch, as legal director, and also with Gil's work as legal director, he really enhanced the credibility of CCR as a legal organization. It always had a huge credibility as a political organization, but as a legal organization, he really contributed to that, both him and Michael, and that continues today. He left this center in about 2003 to become partners with me and the firm of Moore and Goodman, which had an existence that lasted about 2 years, which meant that the money we put in, we spent for 2 years and didn't make anything. But we did really important work. We worked on the Floyd, not the George Floyd, the David Floyd stop and frisk case. That was a case that we began in 2001 following the death of Amadou Diallo in New York City, who was a West African immigrant who was walking home and was targeted by a group called the Street Crime Unit for stop and frisk, and ended up being shot at 41 times because they thought his wallet was a gun, they said. That inspired us to bring the Floyd case, which went on for many, many years, even after Bill left us and went back to Detroit. And eventually in 2013, in part due to Bill's work, but to the work of a lot of folks, that case was tried in federal court, and the judge, after a 10-week trial, made a finding that the New York City Police Department had adopted a policy of racial profiling and how they did stop and frisk, which was a historic decision, actually. And a lot of the groundwork for that case had been done by Bill Goodman, so he was a big part of that result, even though he wasn't there for the trial. We also worked on another very important case, which was dealing with the legacy of the Vietnam War involving Agent Orange. In 2004, we were asked to get involved in representing the Vietnamese in a suit against the chemical companies, Monsanto and Dow and every chemical company you can imagine, for relief from the fact that they had supplied a poison to the U.S. government called dioxin in their Agent Orange, and which to this day still causes severe injuries and has denuded much of the land in Vietnam still, and caused millions of people to die and to have birth defects. And we worked on that case for several years. I get the honor of being the only one told that I'm speaking too long, so I appreciate that, Katie. I did want to mention that because it's a very important case, and it was the kind of case that Bill loved. We knew it was an impossible case to win, but we took it on anyway. And when people were talking about his driving ability, 2 seconds, we went out to see a witness during the day in that case out in Long Island, and everything was fine. Bill was driving, and then when we left, it was dark, and Bill got behind the wheel, and oh my God, it was totally different. He felt like every car coming over the hill was going to run into him. So he immediately took evasive action by slowing down and weaving, I don't know why he was weaving, but ending off to the side of the road, and we quickly switched drivers. So he was a unbelievable man, a great father, and it reminds me of the words of a Bob Dylan song where he says in that song, "May your heart always be joyful." Bill had a joyful heart. Thank you.
James Martinez, a people's lawyer here in Detroit, is one of the dozens of students who took Bill's constitutional litigation course at Wayne State Law School over the years. He's here to share some of his perspectives on Bill's role as a teacher and a mentor. James.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share a few stories about Bill. There's a quote from the French philosopher Albert Camus that is, "Friendship is the science of free men." And I think on top of being a legendary litigator and champion of the people, Bill really mastered that science. The first time I met Bill was at a National Lawyers Guild meeting. And as you know, those who have been to board meetings, they can be pretty tense. I was a 1L at the time, and I'm a first-generation law student. And there was a lot of arguing happening. And I look around me also, there's these pictures of legendary labor leaders and civil rights leaders, and I was intimidated, to say the least. Bill walked in, and he shook my hand. He said, "Hey, I'm Bill Goodman." And he sat down, and he opened up a bag of Fritos, and he looked at me with that kind of mischievous but warm smile that he had, and with Fritos in his mouth. "Hey, you want some?" Just ignoring everything else that was going on. I started to go by Bill's office at Goodman Hurwitz, and he would share stories about some of the cases that he litigated. And one case that always stuck out in particular was an elderly Russian man who he had defended. And he was starting to tell this story. He said, the cops came in with flashbang grenades on the first day of Hanukkah. He said they really started the Festival of Lights off with a bang. just an amazing sense of humor. And so from these exchanges, I started to ask, "Bill, I heard you taught a constitutional litigation class. Will you come back and teach it? Will you come back and teach it?" And I'm very fortunate that he did. Not only did he teach me how to become a better lawyer, I think he taught me how to be a better friend to humanity. His passion was evident in every single class, even at 80 years old. And his righteous anger motivates me still now to this day. I love Bill, and he was more than a professor to me. He was a good friend, like he was to many of us. And I just thank you all for the opportunity to speak a little bit about him. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Kate Bush is a beloved member of the Detroit progressive community, and I think it's safe to say that Bill and many others in this room think of Kate as family. She's here to share some of her memories of Bill. Thank you, Kate. Come on up.
As Katie shared, I'm Kate Bush. And it is in this crowd, I realize it is helpful to follow by saying Neil Bush's daughter, which I say with great pride. Though a proud New Yorker, my dad stayed in Detroit after law school at U of M and met Bill and Ernie and got to know them through the NLG and his work on Attica. In addition to my mom's small but mighty family in Michigan and my dad's family in New York, the family I knew from as long as I can remember was made up of my dad's lawyer friends. Bill and Julie were family. Jacob, Nick, and Daniel were cousins. We celebrated Thanksgiving together at the Majestic, watching the parade, followed by dinner, had Passover Seders, birthdays, trips to Lexington, carpools to friends' school in Roper, and dinners around Julie's table for any or no occasion. I have many memories of the funny and animated stories Bill would tell Jacob, Nick, Nina, and I on the drive to friends' school. And I can picture him with a big grin, standing with one arm draped across his body, the other holding his face or a gin and tonic. The intense grief and sadness I have when thinking about Bill's death is because I'm sad to lose his warmth and love. Bill and I had a connection for as long as I can remember. He told people I was his 7th child. A friend shared that he scoffed when they asked if he was my godfather and corrected them that he was one of my many fathers. He told me I was bossy, and so was Amy, and I know he meant it in the most endearing and loving way possible. Bill gave me many great gifts. I, too, was the recipient of a stuffed animal named Murray that he brought over when my daughter Judy was born. And he always made a donation to the Bush Myrer table at the Buck dinner, even though it should have gone to Barbara and Julie's table. But the greatest gift was that he saved my dad's life. In January of 2005, my dad was supposed to drive Bill to the airport for a flight back to New York. When my dad didn't answer the door or the phone, Bill got into my dad's house, found him post-stroke, and got help. My dad's life changed that day, but he was fortunate to have so many close friends who supported and visited him frequently, including many of you in this room. Bill and I had a pact. After my dad died, I told him I would not be able to handle his loss too. And yet here we are. There are no guarantees. When I think about his legacy, there is no doubt his legal career, which we heard so much about today. But for me, his legacy is his unconditional warmth and building community, whether in the legal world, at his watering hole, or with his family who may not be connected by blood, but have deep roots of togetherness. I'm honored that I was asked to speak today. Thank you to Amy, Michael, David, Jacob, Nicholas, and Daniel for giving me this space. And thank you to Julie for all you've been to me and will continue to be. I love you all. My dad died 5.5 years ago, and my connection and relationship with Bill was a key part of keeping my dad's memory alive. So in many ways, by mourning Bill, I find myself grieving my dad all over again. As I shared when eulogizing my dad, I don't know what the afterlife brings, but if it is a place where they can be together, I trust my dad and Bill are kibitzing, sharing a coffee, which my dad has already spilled on his shirt, a bagel with schmear, which Bill has on his chin, and they're both definitely shaking their heads at Thursday night's debate. I miss Bill. I will always miss him. As our tradition says, may Bill's memory be for a blessing. Thank you.
We've reached our last speaker, but not least, Bill's brother, his big brother, Dick Goodman. And while we're getting ready for Dick to speak, I just want to tell a quick story about Dick and Bill. Dick and I were trying a case together in federal district court here in Detroit back in 2007. And Dick was in the middle of a very important closing argument. And he was doing very well. And the defense lawyer, a real jerk, decided that he wanted one of his clerks to bring in about 30 boxes while Dick was doing the closing argument, walk into the well of the court carrying the boxes and distracting the jury. Bill was in the pews watching this. And Bill got up, and I've never seen him so angry in my life. Bill got up, walked into the well of the court, grabbed the guy by the back of the shirt, and dragged him right out of the courtroom with those boxes. And the look on his face was just, his teeth were gritted and the anger, and he looked back over at the jury, and Dick continued and completed a great closing. That to me is sort of the representation of Bill's love for Dick, which I always appreciated and loved. So here's Dick's gonna say a few words. Everyone knows he and I have a special relationship, and he's one of my favorite people. Here you go, Dick.
Thank you, Katie. This has been incredible time for me, and I want to just thank and express my profound gratitude and heartfelt love for all of you who have seen fit to come here today and be part of this program. You know, I've known about this event for some time. It's been planned. You guys have done an incredible, great thing in presenting this. And I've scratched my head so many times to say, what in the hell can I do? What can I say? Because tonight, whatever, so much, in fact, everything in a way has been said, has been spoken, has been talked about, and there is the room itself is so full of love and admiration and sheer wonderment at this kid brother of mine. So in figuring out what the hell I was going to say, I decided to present to you a song. Because, for me anyway, music is where it's at when emotions go in this direction. And I believe that presenting the music that you're going to hear, you'll see perhaps of how I feel and maybe how you feel about my brother. And then after we've heard the song, I want to say a few words about what happened after the song. Yeah, let's play it.
Okay, we're ready to play it.
What desperados will you find to steal your heart and take your mind from every jail and every pen that scars the land and kills the men? Brother Bill, Don't you rest, you never will. From the Wayne County hellholes to the Gitmo torture racks, are you hauling the water on your arthritic back? Is there any man so wretched you have barred him from your door? Are there Agent Orange cripples? Are there kids against the war? Are there hated and reviled? Are there homeless? Are there poor? Do you press them to your bosom? Is your bosom getting sore? Brother Bill, oh Brother Bill, don't you rest, you never will. From the Wayne County hellholes to the Gitmo torture racks, are you hauling the water on your arthritic back? From Attica to Danville, are they written in your soul? Whose voices are you hearing as you stop to count the toll? Is it Albie? Is it Ernie? Is it Holt and Martin too? Does that mighty chorus echo in the things you fight to do? Brother Bill, Brother Bill, don't you rest, you never will. From the Wayne County hellholes to the Gitmo torture racks, are you hauling the water on your arthritic back? Brother Bill, Brother Bill, Brother Bill.
So when I played this and for Bill, sang it for him at a small birthday party many years ago, I don't even know when. Afterwards, he pulled me aside and he said, "I just want to tell you one thing." He says, "That damn song sounds like a funeral dirge." He said, "I'm going to tell you something." He says, "You do that at my funeral or anything like that," he says, "and I'm telling you right now, I'm not gonna be there. I ain't coming. Forget it." So I said to him, "Is that a promise?" So that song has been a sort of a marker between us all these years, and when I hear it, it says what's been said here today with such beauty and such immense love, and I'm humbled by the fact that I had a brother like this, and if he keeps his promise, he won't be here, and he will be here. So thank you so much for hearing from us, and Brother Bill,